Grief and inevitability are two of the great fears that humanity shares, as we all die, and we are all going to lose people we love. No matter what we do, what choices we make, or how hard we fight against that reality, it remains to be a reality all the same. It is a depressing and terrifying thought that can completely overwhelm you if you let it, which is why it has also been one of the oldest and most enduring themes in all of storytelling. The very first written story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, follows a man consumed by grief who journeys in search of immortality, only to learn that death cannot be conquered. 4,000 years later, and authors like C.S. Lewis continue to explore this theme in A Grief Observed, which describes the disorienting isolation of losing his wife, while modern grief counselors like Megan Devine, in It's Okay That You're Not Okay, remind us that grief is not something you get over, but something that you learn to carry. Despite this deep history of grief in storytelling, for much of gaming's lifetime, grief has been a theme which was avoided. For many people, gaming and storytelling in general serves to be a form of escapism, a hobby that can make you forget your day-to-day by letting you jump on turtles, destroy the enemy Nexus, or gun down Goku and the Ninja Turtles with Hatsune Miku and Iron Man. Fortnite is a hell of a drug. Games, for many people, are pure entertainment, power fantasies, challenges to overcome, or just something silly or fun. And it's because of that when a game takes the time to break from that mold, it often stands out, especially if they are done well. Growing up, my go-to games were Pokemon, Smash Bros, Ratchet & Clank, and Halo. And I spent an ungodly amount of time on all of them. But there was one game I played that I remembered really standing out to me. Final Fantasy X. I had played Final Fantasy VII in the past, but I was a dumb kid. I couldn't really understand or appreciate what was being presented. And Final Fantasy X was the first time I really saw that a game could actually be more than just something you play. It was this heartbreaking story of a world overwhelmed by a monster called Sin, and I expected the entire way through that once I grinded enough levels, became strong enough, and made it to the final battle, I'd be able to defeat Sin and save the world. It is classic game storyline, right? But that isn't really what happened. In actuality, you reach the game, and despite stopping Sin, you still feel as though you've lost something. Stopping this one source of sadness and destruction came at a massive cost, and even with Sin gone, grief found a way to creep back in through other avenues. It was this incredibly bittersweet ending that I never could have experienced through the other games that I played, and because of that, it has always held a place as one of my favorite games of all time. I actually went back to play through it just this year, and it hit just as hard as ever. Ironically, knowing where things are going, that inevitable loss, came with its own sense of grief throughout the journey. But that was a game from a quarter century ago, and since then there have certainly been other games which have explored these themes as well. Before Your Eyes, What Comes After, and even the more recent God of War games, to name a few. However, this year a game came out that brought me right back to Final Fantasy X. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 perfectly recaptured that feeling of impending doom, of wide-scale loss, of tragic perseverance, and of rejecting inevitability. The game is undoubtedly largely influenced and inspired by Final Fantasy X, and you can feel that in so much of Clair Obscur. As you might imagine, with so much time passing between when these stories came out, the themes and presentations are drastically different in a lot of ways. Time changes how media presents things. However, some things don't change. Some things are universal and ever-present. And so I wanted to take a look at these two games and talk about how they presented 25 years of grief.
I'll continue. I must. If I give up now, I could do anything I wanted to. And yet, even if I was with you, I could never forget.
Final Fantasy X is a game which is flooded by grief. Every aspect of Spira, its history, its culture, and its people are built up from this idea of enduring tragedy and hardship.
Why is it everything in Spira seems to revolve around people dying.
The world is almost defined by fear, fatalism, and a sense of death that never truly leaves, all physically embodied by the colossal monster called sin. Sin was created as a living weapon to punish technological advancement and keep humanity from destroying itself.
Mankind waged war using machina to kill.
They kept building more and more powerful machina.
They made weapons so powerful, it was thought they could destroy the entire world.
The people feared that Spira would be destroyed.
But the war did not stop.
Sin came, and it destroyed the cities and their machina.
The war ended, and our reward was sin.
So, sin's our punishment for letting things get out of hand, eh?
For 1,000 years, it has ravaged civilization, erasing progress and forcing people into simple, fearful lives. The only hope for Spira's people lies within summoners, who gather powerful aeons and perform a ritual called the Final Summoning to kill sin, at least temporarily, granting a few years of peace known as the Calm.
The Calm is a time of peace. It comes after a summoner defeats sin, and lasts until sin reappears.
Unfortunately, this ritual comes at its own cost, the summoner's life. It is one great sacrifice in exchange for those around you getting to experience peace, if only for a few years until sin comes back.
Wait, if it just comes back...
Don't say it isn't worth it. Because it is.
This spiral of tragedy creates 3 distinct forms of grief that permeate the game. Anticipatory grief, represented through the people of Spira waiting for sin to inevitably attack. Personal grief, experienced by those who lose their homes and their loved ones to sin. And collective grief, the shared suffering that unites all of Spira. This fear and sadness becomes a routine in the daily life of Spirans.
I don't even remember my parents. Can't say how I feel about them.
I was 5 then, so I remember mine a little.
Damn it! Sin just takes everything away from us.
Their families, homes, and entire villages are all living on borrowed time, and sin could arrive at any moment to take all of it away in an instant. The only rationale that people can come to explain these random and brutal attacks is that it all must be some sort of divine punishment.
Long time ago, there were a whole lot of cities in Spira. Big cities with machina, machines to run them. People played all day and let the machina do the work. And then, well, take a look. Sin came and destroyed the machina cities. If you ask me, sin's our punishment for letting things get out of hand.
We turned our backs on the teachings and cast away our faith. This is our just reward.
This is all punishment for turning from Yevon.
And so the Church of Yevon was created to calm Spira's people, giving them some sense of purpose and logic to the chaos.
If we keep faith in Yevon's teachings, it will be gone one day. But if we atone for our crimes, sin will stop coming back, yeah? Someday it'll be gone, yeah?
Will humanity ever attain such purity?
The teachings state that we can exorcise sin with complete atonement. It's been our only hope all these years.
Hope is comforting. It allows us to accept fate, however tragic it might be. Yevon's teachings and the final summoning give the people of Spira hope. Without hope, they would drown in their sorrow.
Nearly every character in the game is used as some method of exploring how grief presents itself and evolves. In her 1969 book on death and dying, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross examined the lives and emotional states of terminally ill patients, and defined 5 stages which those dealing with grief often experienced, being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And while those might seem to be set in stone in pop culture, her 1974 book followed up on this idea, in which she says,
"Most of my patients have exhibited 2 or 3 stages simultaneously, and these do not always occur in the same order."
Kubler-Ross regretted how it was originally framed. These stages were descriptive and not prescriptive. They helped explain what people were experiencing, but it is not a perfect system where things always went in order. As it turns out, humanity and mental health are fairly complicated. But that brings us to our dual protagonists. Tidus, or Tidus, a blitzball star from Zanarkand, who is pulled into Spira by sin and seemingly flung 1,000 years into the future. Everything and everyone he has ever known is gone, so he clings to hope that defeating sin might send him home.
I think I had a dream of being alone. I wanted someone, anyone, beside me.
Soon he comes across our second protagonist, Yuna, who is a summoner preparing for her pilgrimage to defeat sin, and ultimately to sacrifice herself for the rest of Spira.
Yuna chose her own path. She knew from the beginning what it meant. All we can do is protect her along the way until the end.
Tidus's father, Jecht, vanished years ago, and Tidus blames him for his mother's death after he left. He rejects the idea that he might care for what Jecht thinks of him, but at the same time he is constantly trying to live up to his standards, and often his first thought when trying anything is that he is defying his father's low image of him.
Trying not to think about my old man made me think about him, of course.
But even before he disappeared, Jecht was critical, competitive, and emotionally distant. He was quick to belittle Tidus and slow to praise. Worst of all, in Tidus's eyes, he monopolized his mother's love.
Hey, stop dreaming! You with a woman? You can't even catch a ball! Oh, what's the matter? Gonna cry again? Cry. That's the only thing you're good for.
Whenever my old man was around, my mother wouldn't even look at me. Maybe that's when I started to resent him, even hate him.
However, when we see more from Jecht, this is all called into question. Don't get me wrong, the guy is kind of a dick, but he also genuinely cared about his son, even if he didn't know how to show it directly.
Wait. Jecht loved you. He just didn't know how to express it, he said. I just thought you should know.
For example, there are all of the messages that Jecht left for Tidus across Spira. One in particular has him struggling to put his emotions into words as he stumbles awkwardly through what he wants to say.
Hey, if you're sitting there watching this, it means you're stuck in Spira like me. You might not know when you'll get back home, but you better not be crying. Although I guess I'd understand. But you know what? There's a time when you have to stop crying and move on. You'll be fine. Remember, you're my son, and, well, never mind, I'm no good at these things. Anyways, I believe in you. Be good. Goodbye.
This is probably the single most important and humanizing line that Jecht has in regards to his son. We often see him giving Tidus a hard time. He's this real old-school, men gotta be tough kind of guy that tries to prepare his son for the real world.
Your son plays blitzball?
Yeah, and he wants to beat his old man bad. Once I told him to give it up. He didn't speak to me for a week. Wonder what he's doing now. I hope he got bigger and put on some muscle.
But this one recording shatters everything that Tidus knew about his father.
I guess I understood. My old man. He knew there was no way back home. Back to Zanarkand. He wanted to go home, but he knew he couldn't. He couldn't go on until he accepted it. Maybe I had to start accepting my own fate.
And this is all complicated even further as Tidus learns that his father has become sin. So he stops trying to prove Jecht wrong, he stops trying to showboat as much, and he becomes more patient and understanding as a result. His views on defeating sin completely shift. He isn't going to kill sin despite it being his father, he's going to kill sin to free his father, to stop Jecht from making others suffer.
I know. You want this to end. I'll find a way, promise.
It's a moment of catharsis that allows Tidus to begin moving towards accepting his losses, because, as Jecht put it,
There's a time when you have to stop crying and move on.
Yuna is the daughter of High Summoner Braska, the last person to perform the final summoning and to defeat Sin. The last person to sacrifice themselves so that others could know a short period of calm.
So, is Yuna's father famous or something?
Yuna's the heir to a great legacy.
Lord Braska's daughter? She just might have a chance.
So, you're High Summoner Braska's daughter. That's quite a name to live up to.
Your father's famous too. Everyone in Spira knows him, right? Ain't it tough?
It is hard to follow in his footsteps as a summoner, but the honor of having a father like him surpasses all that, I think.
Much like Tidus chose to follow in Jecht's footsteps by becoming a blitzball star, Yuna too also follows in her father's footsteps and becomes a summoner. But beneath that determination is deep denial. She is terrified of her pilgrimage. At first glance, she is this pillar of strength and conviction. What a selfless and beautiful thing to trade your own life for the safety and security of the entire world. Yet the moment she is away from the public eye, you'll hear her quietly admit things like how she learned to force herself to smile even when she is sad.
It's embarrassing to say this myself, but summoners and their guardians are kind of like Spira's ray of light. A lot of people in Spira depend on us. I learned to practice smiling. When I'm feeling sad, you know.
Because if the people knew that she was scared, they'd worry. If the people knew that she was sad, then they might try to talk her out of her sacrifice. If they saw her doubt, they might be angry or disappointed.
In dark times, she must be. She must shine bright. Now are dark times. Yuna tries hard. If we worry, she tries harder. Do not frown.
And the worst thought of all, if she decided that her sacrifice wasn't worth it, then her father died and left her alone for nothing. And so she pushes her fear and her grief down and denies herself the ability to actually experience her emotions.
But now, more than ever, you must be the people's strength, their confidence. Anyone else would be expected to show their sorrow. But you are a summoner. You are Spira's hope.
For Yuna, Braska's death is complicated. Even though he died a hero, in many ways he still walked out on her when she was young.
I was only 7. My father had defeated Sin, and all Pavel was celebrating. Everyone was saying what a hero my father was. I was so happy. But when night came, it occurred to me. My father had defeated Sin, and now he was dead. Now, I was all alone.
Which, of course, is very similar to how Tidus sees his father. Braska decided that peace for Spira was worth more than being there for his daughter, and Yuna had to rationalize that choice after his death. And the conclusion that she comes to is, if his life was worth giving up for peace, then mine must be too.
Don't say it isn't worth it. Because it is.
Even for a little while, people can sleep in their beds without being afraid. That kind of time is worth anything. Don't say it isn't worth it.
Now, importantly, at the start of their journey, Tidus doesn't yet know that defeating Sin means that Yuna will die. He is endlessly encouraging, pushing her forward, not realizing he's cheering towards her execution.
I wish I could live in a place like this.
You can, once you beat Sin, right?
But then, a new Sin will be born anyway.
Well, then you can just beat it again.
I wish I could.
Hey, you can. Trust me. You are the best summoner out there.
And so the pilgrimage continues, every step forward bringing them closer to Yuna's death, until the truth finally catches up to them, and they share a moment in Macalania Woods. This is shortly after Tidus learns what the final summoning really is.
And I've been telling Yuna, let's go to Xanarkand together. Let's beat Sin. I told her all the things. We could. And all along, the whole time, I didn't know anything. But Yuna, she'd Just smile.
Now he has to face the reality of Yuna's fate. However, by this point, both characters have changed because of the other. Tidus's love of life and relentless optimism has started to influence her. She no longer sees her path as a simple black and white duty. She wants to see Zanarkand with him. She wants more time with her friends. And more importantly, she wants to live.
So this is what it feels like. It's a much more wonderful feeling than anything I had ever imagined. I just want to say thank you for everything. Maybe that's why it hurts. When I think about us never being together again at all, I'm afraid.
Meanwhile, Yuna's sense of duty and strength have softened Tidus. He's not as brash or overconfident as he once was. He now sees the value in the calm, even knowing that Sin will return. In the end, the group learns several important truths. Firstly, when Sin is defeated, the spirit of Yevon will infect the Guardian who becomes the final Aeon, and that Guardian will become the next Sin, which is what happened to Jecht. Second, Tidus learns the reality of his own existence. The Zanarkand that he came from is only a dream created by the Faith.
Yes, you're a dream of the Faith. You, your father, your mother, everyone. All dreams. And if the Faith stopped dreaming...
1,000 years ago, when Zanarkand faced defeat in a war against Bavel, its leader, Yevon, transformed his people into Faith to dream a perfect, eternal Zanarkand, a dream sustained as long as Sin exists. This means that if Sin dies, then Tidus dies with him. And this is exactly what happens. In the end of this journey where Yuna had been planning to sacrifice herself for Spira, Tidus is the one who stops Sin, knowing that he will die instead, and Yuna is the one who gets to return home. In coming together to deal with their grief, they complete their journeys at the place that the other was working towards at the start of the story. But grief isn't just for them, it runs through the entire party. Wakka lost his brother Chapu in a battle against Sin and never moved past it. Because Chapu used Albed Machina instead of the sword that Wakka gave him, Wakka grows to resent the Albed, blaming their beliefs and technology for his brother's death.
I can't believe I've been traveling with an Albed, a heathen!
He even tries to fill the hole that Chapu left with Tidus because he looks similar.
So, who's Chapu?
My little brother, Chapu. He looked like you.
He won't admit it, but he thinks if he can be close with Tidus, then in some way, maybe that is similar to being close with Chapu as well. Wakka actually extends this sense of denial to the rest of the world as well through blitzball.
Something wrong with enjoying blitzball?
Is this really the time?
This is the only time. The players fight with all their strength. The fans cheer for their favorite team. They forget pain, suffering. Only the game matters.
Then we have Lulu, who would have become Chapu's fiancé, and who has endured loss after loss. This is her third pilgrimage as a guardian, with one of her previous journeys ending in failure, while the other ended in the summoner's death. Because of this, she has become pragmatic about death.
Strange. I thought it would be sadder somehow. Maybe I've gotten used to farewells.
It is simply the reality of their world, no matter how much it hurts. And so there's no point in letting that hurt slow you down or to not face it head on. There's a moment early on where Wakka says that he is beginning to believe that Tidus is really from 1,000 years ago. However, he's only doing this as a means of holding on to the hope that Chapu is still alive somewhere, and Lulu completely rejects this denial.
I've been thinking, maybe people Sin gets to don't die. Maybe Sin carries them through time, like 1,000 years through time. And then one day, maybe they just pop back, see?
You make up one theory after another, refusing to face the simple truth. Sin didn't take Chapu anywhere. Sin crushed him and left him on the Jose shore. Your brother won't just pop back.
She understands the value of life and the severity of death, and she believes that denying to accept the grief that comes with that is to minimize the pain that those who came before experienced. You can't simply replace someone who has passed, nor can you fill their shoes.
No matter how much you want it, no one can take Chapu's place. No one can replace Sir Jecht, for that matter. And there's no replacement for Lord Braska, either. It's pointless to think about it. And sad.
But not every guardian approves of the summoner's sacrifice, which leads us to Riku, who is not a worshipper of Yevon, and instead is an Albed.
It's in Yevon's teaching. Oh, not that you know.
That's not good enough. Yevon says this, Yevon says that. Can't you think for yourself?
To her, the sacrifice is barbaric and senseless. Because of her different religious worldview, she experiences grief differently than the others. Wakka and Lulu might be able to tell themselves that Sin's attacks are an act of God because of humanity's, sins. But Riku can't fall back on that.
Yuna, she knew what she was doing when she chose to become a summoner. To face Sin, yeah? Yuna knew.
But Wakka, that's just totally wrong. Summoners shouldn't have to sacrifice themselves, just so the rest of Spira can be happy, right?
She simply sees Sin as this terrible force of nature. There is no rationalizing it or explaining it away. She just has to accept what is happening at face value. Of all of the party members, though, Orin is probably the most on-the-nose representation of grief. He is a man so unable to move beyond his past that he literally refused to die, becoming an unsent and lingering in the world in hopes of making up for his own failures.
I wanted to change the world too, but I changed nothing. That is my story. When Braska and Jecht died defeating Sin, I just couldn't accept it. I came back here, tried to avenge them. I've been wandering ever since, never going to the far plane.
The unsent, in general, are embodiments of grief and regret. They are souls of the dead who refuse to accept their passing until they are directed to the far plane by a summoner. And once again, they are used to represent how Yuna helps others overcome their pain.
How many died today? People die and Yuna dances. When will she stop dancing? When will it stop?
However, the unsent souls, if left alone, become consumed by grief and will eventually become fiends, literally transforming into monsters for refusing to come to terms with their reality. In a world where every citizen collectively experiences grief, the isolation of the unsent corrupts them from the inside out. And our final member, Kimahri, is like a cat man, I guess? Beyond our party, though, grief seeps through nearly every corner of Spira. Seymour faces discrimination because he is half Guado and half human, and so his mother sacrifices herself to become a powerful Aeon in hopes of giving him the strength he needs to earn Spira's trust. And this works. Seymour does become powerful and eventually even becomes a maester of Yevon. However, he is also so wrapped in grief, isolation, and despair from his mother's death that he breaks.
Mother, no! I don't want you to become a faith!
There is no other way. Use me and defeat Sin. Only then will the people accept you.
In his mind, these tragedies of grief and suffering would exist for as long as humanity does. So he plans to merge with Sin and wipe humanity from existence, bringing an end to grief by ending the people who can experience it.
Death is a sweet slumber. All the pain of life is gently swept away. Ah, yes. If all life were to end in Spira, all suffering would end. Don't you see? With death on our side, we will save Spira. And for this, I will take from you your strength, Yuna, your life, and become the next Sin. I will destroy Spira. I will save it.
Where our heroes find a way to overcome their grief, Seymour lets his consume him. His answer is to reject feeling altogether. It is antithetical to everything that the game stands for, and that is what makes him such a compelling villain. Similarly, Yu Yevon, the originator of sin, refuses to face grief as well. He won't let his people pass on, instead turning them into faith to preserve a dream Zanarkand. He refuses to let Spira move forward without him, trapping it in an endless cycle of destruction. He won't even allow himself to die, hijacking aeons as a source of a never-ending life. And the Church of Yevon, named after him, reframes this nightmare as divine punishment, sanctifying the spiral that keeps everyone trapped. And of course, this sentiment is echoed in Yuna, who supplies the final summoning by killing the summoner and transforming their guardian into the final Aeon. Everything is in pursuit of preserving hope, even if it is a lie. To her, death is just easier than facing reality.
You would throw away hope. I will free you before you can drown in your sorrow. It is better for you to die in hope than to live in despair. Let me be your liberator.
Even minor characters bear the weight of grief. Luzu and Gata are crusaders who battle against sin, but ultimately your decisions dictate which of these two lives, leaving the other to deal with survivor's guilt. Shalinda is one of the most hopeful characters that the game has to offer. She spends her days helping others in Yevon's name, only for the truth of Yevon to be revealed and for her entire belief system to be called into question. Tromel, who once served Seymour's father Jiskel, convinces himself to remain loyal to Seymour even after he murders his own father, completely in denial of what has happened. The list goes on and on. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or what you believe. In Spira, everyone suffers. Everyone is afraid, and that shared pain is part of what binds the world together, literally becoming Spira's religion. Over time, this church becomes the hope of Spira, a lie told to comfort its people. Meanwhile, summoners and their guardians continue to be sacrificed to fuel this false sense of security.
I give up. So what would an adult do then? They know they can just throw away a summoner, then they can do whatever they like.
And it all just keeps going back to the denial of grief. If you have enough hope to hold on to, then you can keep moving forward. But the more this idea is fed into, the stronger it becomes. Sin will always come back. Ignoring the root of pain will never change things. It is only when someone becomes brave enough to look grief in the eye and make a conscious decision to face reality that sin can truly be defeated so that people can start to heal.
My father, I loved him. So I will live with my sorrow. I will live my own life. I will defeat sorrow in his place. I will stand my ground and be strong. I don't know when it will be, but someday I will conquer it. And I will do it without false hope.
Grief in Final Fantasy X isn't a single emotion or a subplot. It is the air that the game breathes. It is personal in how characters all have to carry the loss of their loved ones. It is anticipatory in how every step of the pilgrimage is shadowed by the knowledge of what's waiting at the end, as well as the reality that sin will attack if this pilgrimage isn't made. And it is collective in the way that all Spira shares the same open wound, passed down for 1,000 years through ritual, loss, and sacrifice. What stands out, though, is how the game frames grief not as something you erase, but as something you need to face and integrate into who you are. You can't run from it or deny it. You have to meet it head on to truly move forward. That doesn't mean you're forgetting those you've lost. It means you're honoring them by looking reality in the eye, accepting the weight of what happened, and still choosing to keep going. And this even reaches the game's ending, which objectively benefits almost everyone, but which I would hesitate to say is happy. Even this beginning of a new, hopeful world is marked by loss, but it's a loss that they need to accept if they want to rebuild. And that's what makes Final Fantasy X's handling of grief so enduring. It's not just a plot point, it is woven into every character arc, every quiet moment, every choice that you make. It's the reminder that grief changes us, but it is what we do with that change that defines who we become. And it's this honest look at loss that carries into Clair Obscur, where Final Fantasy X ties grief to ritual, sacrifice, and the cycles that hold the world in place. Clair Obscur turns the weight of loss towards memory, identity, and the danger of holding on too tightly. Both explore how grief leaves its mark, but where Spira mourns a future that is stolen by inevitability and asks how we can grow from confronting that loss, Clair Obscur questions how grief reshapes who we are and whether denial is a shield that protects us or slowly destroys us.
I know what you're going to say. You want to offer your condolences. You want to say something comforting. But I don't need it. I've had enough condolences.
Clair Obscur takes place in a world that has literally been fractured by grief, with humanity being relegated to live in Lumiere, while on the other side of the world is the Paintress, a woman who paints a number across a monolith, and each year she will lower that number, triggering the Gamage, an event which erases anyone who is of the age being written. Being on a clock, humanity begins fighting back. Each year, an expedition is sent out to find and kill the Paintress in hopes of ending the Gamage forever. These expeditions are named after the year that she writes, and this time it will be Expedition 33. As this number started at 0 or 100, that means that 67 expeditions have attempted and failed. 67 years of people who have lived knowing exactly when the people they love the most would die. This is where the world of Clair Obscur mirrors Final Fantasy X, and where it fundamentally differs as well. In Spira, sin could strike at any moment, or not at all. Death was unpredictable, and the summoner's pilgrimages were an act of service, not of survival. By contrast, the Paintress is precise, methodical, and inescapable. If she is not stopped, you will die in your appointed year. And that difference changes everything. In Spira, people could cling to the hope that sin might pass them by, but in Lumiere, there is no such comfort. The other major difference is that Spira knows sin will return after being defeated, while the people of Lumiere need to hold on to their faith that the Paintress will stay dead. It's a situation which serves as a call to action. While Braska or Yuna might have set off on their journey from the goodness of their heart, those in Lumiere do so out of desperation. When the time comes, every person must make their choice to either spend their last days with their loved ones or to join the expedition to fight for a chance to live. One of the more heart-wrenching representations of this is through Ciel. She had been married to a man named Pierre who died in an accident on one of the islands near Lumiere. As she puts it,
I was prepared for his Gamage, but not for him to die in an accident. We were supposed to have 5 more years together.
It's already an unbearable pain to know how much time you have left with those you love. This is something that a lot of us experience with older members of our family or people who are particularly sick, but it makes run-of-the-mill tragedies hurt all that much more.
You know, that's the insidious thing about the Gamage. It's predictable, almost gentle. It makes Lumiere complacent and accepting, but the Gamage is equally violent than death. Death is just as final.
While you could never plan for a long life together with that person, you could plan for some life together.
When someone you love dies, you don't just lose them in the present or in the past. You lose the future that you should have had and might have had with them. They are missing from all the life that was to be.
Ironically, the only bits of control that people in Lumiere have is to choose what they do with the time they have left. So having that time ripped away is doubly painful. Losing her rock, literally the translation of the name Pierre, sends Ciel spiraling into depression, and ultimately she attempts to drown herself by swimming out to the ocean, where she is saved by Esquier.
Oh, it's you. Hello again, my terrible swimmer friend.
But not before she loses the baby that she was unknowingly pregnant with.
What I didn't know then, what the hospital told me, was that I was pregnant.
After this experience, Ciel begins helping out at the school that Pierre volunteered at, managing to find fleeting traces of him in the children's stories and laughter.
The pain we feel every time we lose someone. But what I needed was to use it. To use everything.
Lunette experiences grief in a very different way. Where Ciel's pain is deeply personal, Lunez builds hers into a foundation of duty. Her parents were scholars who aimed to learn as much as possible about the Paintress and their world, and they instilled these values into her as well. She sees every new experience as a means of understanding. But for Lunette, knowledge is not about just understanding, it is about legacy. She accepts and even expects that, like her parents, she will probably fail to kill the Paintress. Yet that doesn't diminish her resolve. She treats her research notes as weapons, meant to arm the expeditions that follow.
What are you working on? Contingency plans. If we fail, Expedition 32 will need every bit of information we have.
In a world where lives are short and the clock is unyielding, passing the torch becomes a necessity. And this is echoed in the expedition's mantras, which she repeats countless times through the game. For those who come after, and when one falls, we continue.
You swore the oath. When one falls, we continue.
Yes, I know.
When one falls. When one falls. Not if. When. We knew not all of us would make it, but we continue.
Lunette offers such a unique perspective on hope in hopelessness. She knows the odds. She knows she will very likely die, but she also knows that her work, her knowledge, can be carried forward. Even if she fails, the fight will continue, and one day someone will succeed. In Final Fantasy X, collective grief was a tool of understanding. Everyone suffered together, everyone prayed, everyone cried. There was unity in that. However, for many people, that was the end of the discussion. Aside from the Crusaders and the Summoners, no one really took up arms against sin. There wasn't a point to. But Luna shows us Lumiere's version of collective grief is different. Here, the shared suffering demands a shared responsibility. Everyone is called to do something, however small, to push this fight forward. As she says, the future of Lumiere is more important than any individual life. We are all in this together, no matter the cost. When one falls, we continue. This sentiment was actually one that she and our first protagonist, Gustav, shared together. Our first real experience with him comes at the start of the game when we meet his ex-girlfriend, Sophie, just moments before she's to be erased in the Gommage. Sophie actually only appears in the story for a few minutes, but in that short time, she reveals a great deal about how the people of Lumiere aren't on expeditions view their fate. She tells Gustav not to worry.
I can't imagine what you're going through.
I'm fine. I've lived 33 good years. Look around. We've had our whole lives to prepare. We're all fine. Mostly.
She explains why the two of them broke up. Gustav wanted children, but Sophie couldn't imagine bringing a child into this world only for them to die of the Gommage while they are still young.
I always told him you two should never have broken up.
Look at these orphans. That's where we disagreed.
She prays for the expedition's success, not for herself, but so that no one will ever have to make that impossible choice of whether to have children again. Most notably, though, Sophie mentions how, despite her impending Gommage, she feels sorry for the Paintress as she looks sad all alone on the other side of the world.
Sometimes I feel sorry for her.
Who? The Paintress?
Look at her. She looks sad. Maybe she's a prisoner too, stuck in the same cycle with us.
In many ways, Gustav serves as the emotional heart of the early game. He lost Sophie both as a partner and as a person in his life to the Gomage. He inspires his apprentices, acts as a brother and father figure for Mael, and through his invention of the Lumina Converter is arguably the one person who has done the most to give the expeditioners a real fighting chance.
Lucien died to save me. And Tristan. Margot, they all...
As the leader of the 33rd expedition, Gustav shoulders that responsibility heavily. While Luna understands the expedition likely won't survive and would probably end up just clearing the path for those who follow, Gustav not only needs this to be the expedition that defeats the Paintress, but also for his remaining friends to survive. Defeating her without them would mean nothing.
I am not letting Mael die out here. I'm taking her home.
What? No, we have a mission!
Oh, fuck the mission! Fuck the mission, Lune!
In a lot of ways, Gustav reminds me of Yuna. He carries the weight and the fate of the world on his shoulders, wearing a practiced smile. And as such, he can never admit that he is terrified, not of dying, but of losing even more people that he cares about. Which makes the start of their journey all the more devastating. Upon landing, they encounter Renoir, who obliterates the entire expedition in an instant, leaving only Ciel, Lune, Gustav, and Mael to survive. But Gustav doesn't know that the others are alive yet, and after he fails to find any of them, the man who once embodied Lumiere's hope finds himself stripped of it entirely. And much like we saw with Ciel, he hits his lowest point and prepares to take his own life.
You do that, we both die.
Luckily, Luna arrives to stop him before he pulls the trigger, but even so, Gustav's journey ends in tragedy. He never reaches the Paintress. Renoir kills him before the end, forcing the survivors to confront the loss of their leader. And each of them reacts differently to this. Ciel retreats into regret, wishing that she could have had more time that was better spent with him. Luna hardens her resolve, throwing herself into her journal, as she is now certain that their expedition will fail, but is still determined to help guide those who will come after. And Mael completely falls apart, but then becomes obsessed with taking revenge by killing Renoir. And speaking of which, our final expeditioner, Mael, lost her parents when she was only 3, drifting from one foster home to another until she finally found a real family with Gustav and his sister Emma. Notably, Mael is only 16 when she joins the expedition, half the age of the others. While everyone else joined in their last year of life before their Gomage, Mael joins when she would have had nearly another decade of life.
Hey, why did you join the expedition? I mean, with the Gomage, I understand the rest of the team's decision, but you're half their age.
Most expeditioners join in their final year of life because they are determined to give their deaths meaning. Ciel fights for the children her late husband cared for. Lune works to pave the way for future generations. Gustav wants to end the Gomage and this cycle of loss. And Mael joins because she is tired of life in Lumiere.
Out here seemed better than in there, at the time.
It's natural. Wanting to escape a life you don't want.
Escape. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
And this feels shallow and disconnected when compared to the convictions of her companions.
But Gustav and the others, they really want to change things.
But changing your life also counts. Can't always shoulder the world's problems, you know? It'll drain you fast.
But of course, when Gustav dies, this changes, and Mael's mission becomes to kill the people responsible for his death. However, the void that Gustav leaves behind is quickly stepped into by Verso. Verso's visit to Mael the day after Gustav's death is probably one of the hardest moments to listen to in the entire game. There's a real, tangible sense of powerlessness that you can only experience in the face of others grieving. You can't really do anything for them until they are ready. You are forced to just stand nearby, waiting and witnessing their suffering. But the irony is that by simply being nearby, showing that they aren't alone, you are doing something.
I see people, as they approach me, trying to make up their minds whether they'll say something about it or not. I hate it if they do, and if they don't.
As it turns out, though, Mael and Verso share a lot more in common than just the sorrow that they drown themselves in. However, the truth behind that lies within the canvas and the family that created it. As the story unfolds, we meet the Dandre family, revealing that there isn't just the paintress, whose name is actually Aline, but there's also her husband, Renoir, their son, Verso, and their daughters, Clea and Alicia. The Dandres are more than just artists. Their paintings are living worlds, magical canvases into which they can enter at will. However, the longer they stay in these created worlds, the more they risk losing their connection to reality. Years before the events of the game, the Dandre mansion was set ablaze by a group of writers. In the chaos, Verso sacrifices himself to save Alicia, and he did save her life, but in doing so, he shattered their family.
No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. There is a sort of an invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in.
Grief overwhelmed Aline. She mentions how after Verso's death, she wished she could be consumed by rage instead.
I want rage to consume me. Anything to fill the hollow. But rage won't come. And I just float in an endless nothingness.
This only served to isolate her from her family even further than Verso's death already did on its own. Alicia became a constant reminder of her loss, and Aline became unable to even be near her.
The person I cannot be around is Alicia. Her pain is a broken mirror. The shards reflecting back tenfold, and every moment with her the cuts deepen and I feel myself unraveling.
And this is where she turned to Verso's canvas, a painted world that held the last flicker of her son's soul. In this place, she created painted versions of her family, who were immortal and whole, and for the first time since the fire, she felt something. But while painters can enter their canvases freely, there's a cost for staying too long. The boundaries of reality begin to blur, the real world begins to feel like a dream, and the painted world becomes your only reality. But Aline didn't care. She was willing to abandon what was left of her old life, choosing instead to lose herself in the one where her son was still alive. For Renoir, Aline's retreat was its own betrayal.
We don't even share the bonds of grief anymore. She walks her path, and I walk mine. I don't exist to her. None of us do. She's left us all behind to drown by ourselves so that she can drown alone.
He soon entered the painting to try and force her out, and a battle broke out that fractured the world of the canvas, with each of them being trapped within the monolith for decades.
I know how powerful and intoxicating it is. How deeply attached we can become to the worlds we pour our hearts and souls into.
Grief can be all-consuming, pulling people under like a riptide. One death, one tragedy, one unbearable weight that can pull someone below the water. And those who allow themselves or simply can't stop themselves from sinking can be lost forever. Worse yet, not everyone can be rescued. Esquier might have been able to stop Ciel from drowning, but people aren't always that lucky. In the case of Aline, Renoir would be the one to try and pull her up from the waves, but she didn't have the strength or the will to face reality anymore. She would rather pull him down with her than return to a world where all she knew was pain.
She's left us all behind to drown by ourselves so that she can drown alone.
It was very hard for me to see this idea of a perfect world within a grieving one and not think of Zanarkand, a dream city created by the faith so that you, Yevon, didn't have to face reality. An ideal world held together by the efforts of their creator, who could not be part of the utopia that they put together. In Final Fantasy X, we actually get the chance to meet the Faith who sustained Zanarkand, and after 1,000 years, they are exhausted.
You've been dreaming a long time, haven't you?
We've been dreaming so long. We're tired. Would you and your father, would you let us rest?
They simply want to stop dreaming so that they can be allowed to sleep. Meanwhile, at the end of Clair Obscur, we come face to face with that last shred of Verso's soul, and they too are struggling.
You're tired of painting, aren't you? I'm tired too.
The function of these worlds might be similar, providing a means of escaping a tragic reality, but their origins and purpose are vastly different. Zanarkand had been created as a last line of defense to keep people alive in some form or another. But this canvas was painted out of love and creativity by a young Verso. It was a place where he could express himself, giving life to the Gestrels and angry turtles and giant flying marshmallow friends. Grief and loss were at the core of Zanarkand, while Verso's canvas was meant to celebrate life. But even the purest creation can be stained.
Eileen wants her son back. Renoir wants you and Eileen back. You want Gustave back. The cycle we needed to break wasn't the gommage. It's your family's cycle of grief.
I think this is best exemplified in our Verso, who is quite literally the living embodiment of this. When Eileen created her painted family in Lumiere, she, of course, also made an imitation of her late son, a copy living in the shadow of the original and meant to fill his shoes.
But I'm not really Verso, and you're not really Mael, are you?
You're not Verso, no. You look and sound just like him, but you're you.
While the original Verso might have died, this Verso was gifted or cursed with immortality. He had been modeled after a man so full of love that he gave his own life to protect his sister. Someone so full of joy that he made creatures like Esquier. And yet here he was destined to outlive everyone that he would ever meet, to watch them die one after another.
Burying everyone you know while you live on can weigh you down a bit.
To see them fight tooth and nail in this hopeless campaign to destroy his mother. Verso became so tired of this loss that he even considered taking his own life, but of course his gift meant that he couldn't.
How often will the vast emptiness astonish me like a complete novelty and make me say, I never realized my loss till this moment. The same leg is cut off time after time.
It isn't exactly a subtle irony that this world is full of people dreading the paintress's countdown ticking towards their gommage, and yet at the center of it, we have a man desperate to die himself and unable to do so. I think of all the characters in Clair Obscur, Verso might be the most tragic. Don't get me wrong, it is all a tragedy, but he faces grief in a way that no one else truly does. While every other character deals with anticipatory grief in how they are waiting to be erased, Verso deals with the opposite. His grief is never-ending. He is a man drowning while those around him die of thirst, and he knows that he will never be able to escape the loss and lives that he carries with him.
Part of every misery is, so to speak, the misery's shadow or reflection. The fact that you merely don't suffer, but have to keep on thinking about the fact that you suffer. I not only live each endless day in grief, but live each day thinking about living each day in grief.
Now, the real Verso had saved his sister from the fire, but she didn't get away unharmed, and much of her face was burned before she could make it out. She lost an eye and even the ability to speak as a result of her injuries. Alicia had been left in a state of nothingness, a physical version of what her mother was going through. Her body was failing her. She felt guilty of Verso's sacrifice, and Eileen blamed it all on her. Eventually, Clea suggested that she go into Verso's painting to try and get Renoir out, and ultimately she agrees. With the 16-year-old Alicia now being born into the world as Mael with no memories of her former self. And then, 16 years later, After she had experienced a total of 32 years of life, like Gustav's expedition, she sets out to stop the Paintress. However, unlike in Final Fantasy X, where defeating the big bad brings us to the end, this is really just the beginning of Clair Obscur. After defeating Sin, the whole world is safe, but Tidus vanishes as the Faith stop dreaming. It's this very hope-filled moment that has a brutal sadness at its core. Similarly, after stopping the Paintress, the expedition returns to Lumiere, and as they celebrate, Renoir performs a homage that erases all human life from the canvas. We had won, but still lost everything. However, while Tidus's death felt more like a heroic sacrifice for the greater good, this homage just feels like an attack. There is no bittersweet hopefulness, and all that's left is despair. Renoir had wanted to remove everyone from the canvas so that he could destroy it, which in his eyes would save his family from being consumed by their grief and force them to once again live in reality.
No. Look at me, I said no. I am not letting my daughter risk her life. Alicia.
No, Mum. I'm not going to lose myself if I stay.
I know full well you will, and I am not doing this again!
Once Maëlle regains some of her memories and her abilities, she's able to bring back Luna and Ciel, and with the help of Verso, Monoko, and Esquier, they take on Renoir for a final battle that decides the fate of the canvas. And this whole interaction is just intense. Maëlle approaches her father and begs him to give up on erasing Verso's canvas, the last remaining piece of her brother's soul. To which Renoir responds,
Life keeps forcing cruel choices.
He knows that this is the last shred of his son. He knows how much that means to Aline and Alicia, and he knows how potentially dangerous that makes it for them. It's honestly difficult not to see both sides of this argument. Of course, Aline and Alicia want to hold on to something of Verso's. However, Renoir also has a point. When you become obsessed and consumed by the memory of someone, then you can stop living your own life. Your family simply has two people to mourn the loss of. The only difference is that one isn't quite dead yet.
I cannot spend another day with living corpses. Aline in the canvas. Claire fighting a solitary war. You a living ghost.
But Maëlle isn't arguing for the canvas alone. She has Ciel, who knows better than just about anyone how deep and dark the spiral of grief can be.
Grief often blinds us, and we make choices we can never take back.
She has Luna, who knows the influence that a parent can have on how a child sees the world around them, as well as how important it is for that child to eventually decide who they are for themselves.
But ultimately, the voices in their head have to be their own.
Maëlle finally adds that she had never been able to find happiness after the fire because she blames herself for Verso's death.
After the fire, you wanted me to find new joy in life. And I tried, but I couldn't.
But her father already knows and recognizes this, and that's why he's fighting so hard. That's why he's so worried that she's going to be consumed by her grief, just as her mother had been.
Child, it will get better, I promise you. But this is not the way. Your friends speak truth, and it changes nothing.
There is a lot to say about this line. Most important of which is that idea of collective grief. It's this really heavy moment where everyone understands what each other is feeling and thinking. Maëlle doesn't resent her father for his choice. Luna and Ciel aren't confused by the way he's thinking. And Renoir can relate to these people's pain more than anyone else. No one is inherently in the wrong. They have just come to a fundamental disagreement. And that is what's so heartbreaking and beautiful about this moment. With the exception of Clea, who we will get to shortly, the villains in this game aren't monsters. They aren't really even evil. They are hurt They are scared, they are desperate, and they don't know what else to do. We have a mother overwhelmed by the loss of her son, a father trying to hold his family together as grief rips them apart. Life keeps forcing cruel choices, and the game doesn't let you forget that. After Renoir's defeat, the player is handed one of these choices for themselves. Verso crosses into the heart of the canvas and tells what's left of the real Verso's soul that he can finally stop painting.
You're tired of painting, aren't you?
However, Maëlle interrupts and the two begin arguing. Verso believes that she is going to die here and that this painting isn't worth her life. She should return to her family. But Maëlle is terrified at the thought of returning to that old life.
This is not worth your life.
What life? My life of loneliness in a shell of a body.
Here she can live, there she only exists. But this second chance at life for Maëlle comes with more forced painting for Verso's soul and more prolonged suffering for our Verso. There is no path towards an ending where everyone is happy here. This time it is our turn to make one of life's cruel choices. Do we allow Maëlle to keep living in the canvas with her friends, or do we allow Verso to finally find peace and rest? Do we condemn Maëlle to live in her disfigured body, or do we force Verso to continue suffering beyond his own death?
Please, listen to me. Only you can do this. You can do this, please. Unpaint me. Unpaint me.
So...
Please. I don't want this life.
Stop saying that.
I don't want this life. I don't want this life.
Don't do this. Don't leave me again.
It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, huh? You've got this incredible power to paint. You'll never have to suffer a life you don't want. Life keeps forcing cruel choices.
In truth, there is no right answer. There's simply a cruel choice and the grief that comes with it. Now, before we bring everything together, we do have one final member of the Descendre family, Clair, who is untouched by the story's central tragedy in any direct personal way. While Aline, Renoir, and Alicia are consumed by loss, Clair stands apart, seemingly unmoved and unbothered. She is so apathetic to the world around her that she almost seems unsure as to why her family would be distraught over her brother's death, why they could possibly need to escape on such a drastic level. And that's how she feels about real people. She sees the canvas as even more insignificant, treating the painted world as little more than a disposable curiosity. She even takes the painted version of herself that Aline created, a being that is fully sentient, no less alive or feeling than our Verso, and strips her of speech, movement, and independent thought. She becomes a slave, creating nevrons to torment the rest of the world, in a very similar way to how Yevon turned Jecht into sin and had him slaughter countless people as well. But Clair wasn't always like this, though. Before the fracture, she was best friends with Francois. However, she eventually grew out of this relationship, essentially becoming too mature to play with her old toys anymore. But while she didn't care, Francois still did. He waited for centuries for her return, crying every day as the reality set in that she wasn't coming back.
Francois really misses Clair, huh?
Yeah, he waits for her every day. He stopped singing when she left. They are best friends. It's been a few centuries, but she wouldn't leave him.
Clair is a character of shocking cruelty in this world, but also a deliberate contrast. In a story where every other character is drowning in grief and connected to each other through the mutual understanding of pain, Clair is absent, an emotional void. She embodies a truth about loss that we often don't want to confront. Not everyone feels it the same way. For some, grief manifests as obsessive preservation through clinging desperately to the past. For others, it manifests as detachment so complete that it becomes destructive. Claia's role in Clair Obscur is small, but her presence is like a fracture line running through the story. By including someone so antithetical to the family's grief, the game forces us to consider the people who, for whatever reason, be it self-protection, bitterness, or simply apathy, disengage entirely. Much like how Seymour represented the rejection of the grief process in Final Fantasy X, Clair demonstrates how indifference can be just as corrosive as despair. In Final Fantasy X, grief is framed as a wound that, though deep, can heal. Tidus fades away, but the world is saved. Yuna walks forward into the future. The promise of a better tomorrow is still intact. It is bittersweet, a sacrifice wrapped in hope. But Clair Obscur, 25 years later, refuses to give us that kind of resolution. Victory doesn't bring closure. Renoir's rescue of his family feels more like an assault, even if it's born out of love. And then the game turns to you to make one of life's cruel choices, forcing you to decide who suffers so that the other can live. It's a story that insists some wounds will never close, and that moving forward often means losing or leaving behind something precious.
There's not a reason for everything. Not every loss can be transformed into something useful. Things happen that do not have a silver lining.
But you must make these cruel choices that life offers you, or you risk becoming a monster that destroys those around you, like is the case for both Seymour and Clair. Together, these portrayals show grief as something without a singular face. It can be consuming obsession, numbing apathy, desperate hope, or the raw pain of an impossible choice. Where Final Fantasy X finds meaning in letting go, Clair Obscur recognizes that sometimes letting go feels like another great loss. And maybe that's the difference that 25 years can make. Back then, our cultural stories about grief still leaned towards resolution. We wanted to believe that after enough time, enough courage, enough sacrifice, we could walk forward healed. But in a world shaped by long collective traumas, wars that never seemed to end, a pandemic that reshaped everyday life, a climate crisis that is always looming, our modern stories often admit that grief doesn't disappear, it lingers, changes us, and sometimes it defines us. These games clearly have a million parallels, and I am more than certain that Clair Obscur was heavily influenced by Final Fantasy X, but maybe the reason they still feel so distinct isn't just about the game design or the writing, maybe it's about the world that shaped these stories. 2001, we still told ourselves that grief could be a chapter that we close if we addressed it head on. It was just a problem to be solved. But now we see it differently. Grief is more of an ongoing relationship, one that shifts with time. Sometimes we hide from it, losing ourselves in distractions or in worlds where pain can't reach us. And other times, like Verso, we realize that the only way forward is to step back into life and let that grief walk beside us instead of burying ourselves with it. Yet, both games are telling the truth. Grief is as old as humanity itself, but the way we talk about it will always reflect the moment we are living in. Whether we could find the comfort of hope after loss, or if we are left with the reality that some choices or events just never stop hurting. Both stories are worth hearing, and both, in their own way, remind us of the same thing. We don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. It becomes a part of us that shapes the way we love, the way we remember, and the way that we allow ourselves to live.